Hello everyone, I'm Eternal Flame here, and today I wanted to talk about Conquest, especially with him finally appearing in the new episode, and I need to say, that episode was magnificent. It was fantastic. All the characters put on a tremendous show, however there's one in particular who clearly took the spotlight. That character, of course, being Conquest. The true and biggest test for Mark, a test to see if he is worthy of protecting the planet or not, and just to show how far he has to go in power in order to prepare for the threats that are coming next. Someone who pushed Mark to his limits physically and mentally and came at the absolute worst time he could have, but in a way was also the best fighter Mark could have possibly had. However, there is one aspect that I felt the show did significantly better in comparison to the comics. In the comics, we get the idea that Conquest lives for the fight, that is all he is, and that's kind of why he's like a really shallow character. He's more of a plot device than a character. My friend 100 made a really good video about that, so go check that out when you're done here. And in the show, they give off that impression at first. After all, they make Conquest seem like this completely sadistic person, and that's all he is. He literally tells Mark mid-fight to continue going. He tries to motivate him because he's having the absolute time of his life. They also carry on that feeling that while the Viltrumite Empire is definitely angry at Mark, he is not. If anything, Conquest really likes Mark. It clearly feels like he thinks Mark has some good levels of potential and he just needs to bring that potential out of him to get the best fight he could. And as he's fighting against him, he's continuing to educate him as well, educating him about why he doesn't have the weakness that he does. For most of the episode, Conquest just feels like this unmovable, unconquerable wall. Because even when Mark stops holding back, it's not enough to take Conquest out. However, they do one thing better in the show than they do in the comics, which is giving him a speech he makes to Mark. When Mark is being choked out by Conquest, he moves close to him and whispers his emotions. Emotions that Conquest usually keeps buried down deep within him about how he feels about the Viltrumite Empire, about his role in life, about the fact he doesn't even have a name and that his name is his purpose, about the isolation Conquest feels just by existing because he's deemed as unstable by the other Viltrumites. Now, I'm not going to play the speech for you on screen because I think you all should watch the actual Invincible episode themselves, because Jeffrey Dean Morgan does an amazing job with that speech, so you should go watch it. But this speech enlightens us in two things about Conquest. The first thing is something the comics already kind of show us, but this show does really good in actually showing it to us, which is the fact that Conquest knows about the Viltrum facade. Conquest doesn't really believe in Viltrum existing to help better other planets. He doesn't actually think that's the purpose of the Viltrumite Empire. He just sees it as an excuse to fight. And while the comics do somewhat show with the initial speech he gives to Mark about how Anissa would have tried to convince him and tell him what he's doing is stupid, the show does it really well. The show makes it seem like Conquest genuinely knows what his purpose is to the Viltrum Empire, and the Viltrum Empire is not really what it seems to be. It's not made to make things a utopia, it is an empire in a form of bloodshed for him. A way to satisfy the purpose that he was given as Conquest. Because he exists to be brutal, he exists to be alone and conquer any planets completely on his own. And he rolls at that job and purpose he has as well, and using that to guide how he lives his life when he goes to invade. However, it's the second part of what that speech does that really shows a lot about him, which is succeeding in giving the impression that Conquest is a monster already far too gone. Showing Conquest has human emotions just like Omniman did, desires to not be lonely, desires to have comrades. But the Empire ripped that desire to shreds, slowly turning him into what he was today, making him suffer an absolute success, down to the point where people only see him as his purpose, to conquest, and as a result of that, everybody in the Viltrum Empire tries to avoid him, tries to in particular not talk with him. Sure, yes, people in the Viltrumite Empire already don't try and make bonds with each other, but it's very particular with Conquest where everybody tries to avoid him. He is always alone. And in a way, seeing Conquest become such a monster, so badly to the point where he is willing to see past the Viltrum facade and he accepts that role anyways, he makes that role his life and his purpose. Even though we can see past the Viltrum facade that most people put on, even though we can see that the Viltrum Empire and their actions are truly evil, he takes enjoyment in it and pleasure in it, which not just shows that he was a person that was far gone and turned into a monster by his society, but the danger of Viltrum as a whole. After all, from what I can see from the most general reaction, as well as both my reaction and the person I was watching its reaction, a lot of people seem to ask the same question. What would have happened if Conquest was sent to Earth in Nolan's place? Could there have been a potential chance that Conquest could have turned good if he ended up going the same route that Nolan did? Because that speech does so well in making it seem like Conquest has a small chance for redemption, that if things went a slight bit different, he could have been a different person, but at this point he is far, far too gone. Someone who was praised by completing so many of the Viltrumite Empire's actions to the point where other Viltrumites see him as a monster. And all he has to live for and fight for is the purpose that he was given, the name he was given, Conquest. And it's not just the speech that does that either. Throughout the fight, you can even see small glimpses of him understanding too, understanding why Mark is the way he is. He even calls out understanding why Mark is so connected to Eve. He can see it directly even though he sees it as a weakness, as he says himself. Now, to answer one of the questions I posed a little bit earlier of could Conquest have been redeemed if he was sent to Earth in Nolan's place, my honest answer is no, and I think that's kind of the point of that speech. Even though Conquest seems like there is this sliver of hope, this sliver of person left inside of him, he is far too gone. He is far too aware of what he is doing. He doesn't see glory to his actions, only pleasure from his own actions. He is a monster created by the Viltrum Empire, one that needs to die and one that shows why the Viltrum Empire needs to die, because he was just sadly too deep into it to fully ever be able to change for the better. Sure, some people might be able to be saved in the Viltrum Empire as we saw with Nolan to be possible, just Conquest is never going to be one of those people. Maybe 1,000 years ago it could have been possible for him to be saved. Maybe sometime in the past he could have been saved as he got the right mental help, but things are just far too gone now, and right now he is a monster who needs to be eliminated. And that's my opinion on why I like the show version of Conquest a lot more than I like the comic version of Conquest, and I think the comic version of Conquest is great too. And I think it's kind of an advantage of Invincible as a show as well. Invincible as a show I think is just the more refined version of what Robert Kirkman intended. Sure, the comics has quite a lot of themes to it and it's clearly a different story. After all, there are a bunch of things different in the comic in comparison to the show that it's not even funny. But with that time to reflect, time to see what he had done wrong and how to make his things better, he clearly has made it better. However, that's my opinion on Conquest. I want to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'm gonna see y'all later. Peace out.